There was war in Persia, the land we now know as Iran. This was 1,000 years ago, and Persia was home to a peaceable people, the Zoroastrians, who for 2,000 years, since the coming of their prophet, Zoroaster, had believed in one God, a God who was everywhere and in everything. They also believed that the best symbol of their God's love, light, and power was fire. So they created great fire temples and fire shrines. But 1,000 years ago, Persia was invaded by Muslims, who also believed in one God, who was everywhere and in everything. But when they saw the great fire temples, they misunderstood the Zoroastrians and believed that they were worshipping fire itself as a god. So they destroyed the great fire temples and the fire shrines and gave the Zoroastrians a choice. They could convert and become Muslim, or they could leave. Some did convert, but most decided to leave, and thousands of them followed their high priest on the long trek southwards to the Gulf of Oman, where they boarded small boats and set sail across the Indian Ocean, bound for India, where they had been told there might be place for them to live. At last they came to a small island just off the coast of Gujarat in northwestern India. There they paused to regroup, to rest, and prepare themselves for the last leg of the voyage across the small strip of ocean into Gujarat itself. Now Gujarat is a beautiful land, and it was home to a peaceable people, the Hindus, who too believed in one God who was everywhere and in everything. But their God had many different names, many different faces, many different shapes, many different characters. Life in Gujarat was rich and wholesome. The king of Gujarat loved his people and loved their rich, wholesome culture. So when he heard that there were thousands of Zoroastrians planning to invade his beautiful country, he was angry. How could his people cope with an influx of thousands of strangers with strange language, strange clothes, strange beliefs? It would destroy their rich and wholesome culture. So he went down to the shore to speak to the high priest. The two men met, face to face. They tried to communicate, but they spoke different languages. So the king called a servant to bring him a bowl, a large, beautiful bowl, which he placed on the ground between him and the high priest. By signs, the king indicated that this bowl represented the whole of Gujarat. The high priest indicated that he understood. The king called for milk. He took the milk and poured it slowly, steadily into the large bowl, until the bowl was full to the brim. Then he dipped a finger in the milk and tasted it, and invited the high priest to do the same. The high priest did, and understood that the king was saying that life in Gujarat was rich and wholesome, like milk. But the king then sighed, "Gujarat is full. There is no more room in Gujarat." The high priest acknowledged and smiled, and called for a bag of sugar. He took 2 great handfuls of sugar, and slowly, carefully, he dripped the sugar, grain by grain, into the bowl of milk, so slowly and carefully that each grain dissolved in the milk before the next grain hit. And when at last his hands were empty, all the sugar had dissolved in the milk, and still the bowl was not overflowing. The high priest dipped a finger in the milk and tasted it, and invited the king to do the same. The king did, and smiled. He understood that the high priest was saying, if the Zoroastrians are allowed to come into Gujarat slowly, carefully, they will mix in with the rich, wholesome culture and make it sweeter. The king smiled and indicated that he would welcome the Zoroastrians, but there would be 3 conditions. First condition: language. You must learn to speak our language. The high priest understood and smiled. Condition 2: clothes. You must learn to wear our style of clothes. The high priest understood and agreed. Condition 3: religion. The high priest looked concerned. The king smiled. Condition 3: religion. You must keep your religion to you. We will keep our religion to us, and we keep them apart. The high priest smiled his agreement, and now, 1,000 years on, Hindus and Parsis, so called because they come from Persia, live together in Gujarat. And in Gujarat, life is as wholesome, rich, and sweet as milk and sugar